My name is Michael Carter. I'm 52 years old, a self-made entrepreneur who built a tech empire from the ground up. From the outside, my life looks perfect. I have a sprawling home, a luxury car, and a family I adore. But beneath the surface, something has always been missing. My drive for success has left little room for reflection, and as the years passed, I found myself wondering if all the wealth and power meant anything at all. I spent my days chasing bigger deals and higher profits. Time with my family became an afterthought, a luxury I could only afford on rare weekends. I told myself I was doing it for them, for their future, but deep down, I knew the truth. It was about me. My ambition had consumed me. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of meetings and negotiations, I collapsed in my office. A sharp pain shot through my chest, and the world around me blurred into darkness. The paramedics were called, and I was rushed to the hospital, but somewhere along the way my heart stopped. I felt myself slipping away, the noise of the world fading into silence. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in the hospital. I was standing in a vast, glowing space that felt both endless and intimate. The air shimmered with a golden light, and everything was eerily still. My body felt weightless, and my mind was clearer than it had ever been. "Michael," a voice called, deep and resonant. I turned to see a figure approaching, radiating an aura of peace and authority. The figure was neither male nor female, and their face seemed to shift subtly, as though it reflected the essence of everyone I had ever trusted. "Where am I?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Am I dead?" The figure smiled faintly. "Not yet. You are here because there is something you must see. Something that will shape not only your life, but the lives of many." Before I could ask more questions, the space around me transformed. The golden glow dimmed, replaced by a swirling mist. Within moments the mist cleared, and I found myself standing in the middle of a bustling city street. It looked familiar. New York, perhaps, but something was off. The air was tense, filled with the sounds of shouting and sirens. "Watch closely," the figure said, standing beside me. They gestured toward a massive screen on the side of a building. On it, a news anchor announced the results of a historic election. "Donald Trump has been elected the 45th President of the United States," the voice declared. The crowd around me erupted into chaos. Some people cheered, waving banners and chanting Trump's name. Others screamed in anger, their faces contorted with disbelief. Protests broke out, and the atmosphere grew more volatile with each passing second. "This is just the beginning," the figure said, their voice tinged with sorrow. "His election marks a turning point, one that will reveal the fractures within society." The scene shifted again, and I was now in a boardroom. I recognized the faces of world leaders sitting around a large table, their expressions tense. Trump was at the head of the table, his demeanor brash and commanding. The leaders argued, their voices clashing over issues of trade, climate policies, and military alliances. The room felt like a pressure cooker, moments away from exploding. "This," the figure explained, "is what happens when leadership prioritizes ego over empathy, power over unity. The consequences will be far-reaching." As they spoke, the scene dissolved, replaced by images of wildfires consuming forests, hurricanes devastating coastal cities, and people fleeing their homes in droves. The suffering was palpable, and I felt a deep ache in my chest. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, my voice cracking. "What am I supposed to do?" The figure turned to me, their gaze steady. "You must understand that the events you see are not the result of one man alone. They are the reflection of a society driven by greed, division, and a disregard for the collective good. Trump's presidency is a symptom, not the cause." The figure led me to another scene, one that felt uncomfortably personal. I was standing in the middle of a suburban neighborhood, but it wasn't peaceful. Neighbors were shouting at each other, their faces twisted with anger. Signs with opposing political slogans were staked into lawns, and people who had once been friends now stood divided by invisible lines. "This division will only deepen," the figure said. "The polarization you see here will spread, tearing apart families, communities, and even nations." I wanted to look away, but the vision wouldn't let me. I saw parents arguing with their children over politics, friendships ending over disagreements, and communities disintegrating into factions. The unity I had taken for granted in my own life now felt like a fragile illusion. The figure placed a hand on my shoulder, their touch both comforting and heavy with meaning. "These divisions are not inevitable, they are choices. Choices to prioritize being right over being kind, to cling to power rather than seek understanding." The scene shifted once more. I was now standing in front of a massive wall, its surface cracked and crumbling. On one side were people desperately trying to climb over, their faces etched with fear and desperation. On the other side, others stood with weapons, their eyes cold and unyielding. "This is what happens when fear governs decisions," the figure said, "when empathy is replaced by indifference." Tears welled in my eyes as I took in the enormity of what I was seeing. "But what can I do?" I asked. "I'm just one person." The figure's gaze softened. "You are more than one person. You are a voice, a connection, a catalyst. If you return to your life, you can inspire others to see beyond their differences, to choose compassion over conflict." I felt a surge of determination, but also doubt. What if I fail? The figure smiled, their expression filled with quiet confidence. "Failure is part of the journey, but the choice to act, that is what defines you." The figure led me to a quieter scene, one that felt strangely hopeful amidst the chaos. We stood in what looked like a community center, filled with people from all walks of life. Some were organizing supplies, others were teaching children, and a few were simply sitting together, sharing meals. The room buzzed with energy, but it wasn't tense, it was purposeful. "These are the moments that matter," the figure said, their tone softer now. "Amidst division and conflict, there are always those who choose to build bridges instead of walls." I watched as a young woman stood up to address the group. She spoke passionately about the need for unity, for finding common ground despite differences. Her words resonated deeply, and I noticed how the faces in the room began to light up with hope. "Leadership doesn't always come from the top," the figure continued. "True change begins in places like this, with people who are willing to listen, to care, and to act." The vision shifted slightly, showing other scenes of grassroots efforts, protests where people marched for justice, neighborhoods coming together to rebuild after disasters, families learning to mend relationships torn by political strife. It was a stark contrast to the earlier images of division and destruction. "These people," the figure said, "are the antidote to the chaos you've seen. They prove that humanity's future is not set in stone. It is shaped by the choices of individuals." I felt a flicker of hope in my chest, but it was quickly tempered by doubt. How can these small actions make a difference when the problems are so big? The figure turned to me, their expression steady. "Change starts with a single ripple. One voice inspires another and another until the tide begins to shift. Even the smallest actions carry the potential for immense impact." The vision began to fade, and I felt the pull of reality tugging at me. The glowing expanse started to dissolve, and the figure's presence seemed to grow fainter. Panic surged within me. "Wait!" I called out. "I still don't understand everything. What if I don't know how to make a difference?" The figure's voice remained calm, resonating through the fading light. You already have the tools you need, Michael. Your influence, your voice, your connections. Use them to inspire understanding and compassion. Lead by example, and others will follow. The golden light dimmed further, and I felt myself being drawn back into my body. The figure's final words echoed in my mind. Remember, the future is not a fixed path. It is a garden shaped by those who choose to nurture it. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the hospital, surrounded by machines beeping steadily. My wife was sitting by my bedside, tears streaming down. Her face as she whispered prayers. My children stood nearby, their expressions a mix of worry and relief. I tried to speak, but my throat felt raw. Instead, I reached out, grasping my wife's hand. Her warmth grounded me, anchoring me back to life. As the days passed, I recovered physically, but the visions lingered in my mind. The chaos, the division, and the moments of hope. They felt more real than anything I had ever experienced. I knew I couldn't ignore them. I had been given a second chance, and I wasn't going to waste it. Returning to my life was harder than I anticipated. The world I had taken for granted now seemed fragile, teetering on the edge of something profound. Everywhere I looked, I saw echoes of the visions, people arguing over politics, communities struggling with inequality, and the environment straining under humanity's neglect. But I also saw opportunities, moments where kindness could flourish, where understanding could grow, inspired by the young. Woman in the community center, from my vision, I decided to take action. I started small, reconnecting with my family, listening more, and making time for the things that truly mattered. But soon, I realized I needed to do more. At work, I began implementing programs to promote ethical practices and environmental sustainability. I encouraged my employees to volunteer in their communities, offering paid time off for charitable efforts. To my surprise, the initiatives were met with enthusiasm. People wanted to make a difference. They just needed someone to show them how. Outside of work, I began speaking at events, sharing my story. At first, I left out the celestial details, focusing instead on the lessons I had learned about leadership, empathy, and the importance of unity. But as my confidence grew, I started to share more of the vision I had experienced, including the warning about Trump's presidency and its reflection of societal imbalances. Some people dismissed me as delusional, but others listened. I received messages from strangers who said my story had inspired them to make changes in their own lives. The ripple was growing. One evening, as I sat with my family, my wife placed her hand on mine. "You've changed," she said, her voice filled with warmth. "But it's a good change. I'm proud of you." Her words solidified my resolve. I wasn't just living for myself anymore. I was living for the future, for my family, my community, and the countless lives I might never meet, but could still impact. The figure's words echoed in my mind. The future is a garden, shaped by those who choose to nurture it.